Greetings, friends. Charlie Kirk's death is a tragedy for his wife and children, and it's a tragedy for the American nation. And any person in the world with an ounce of morality should be revolted at what happened. Now, I have not seen the video unblurred with all the graphic details. I do not need to see that. I already saw the Bud Dwyer video when I was a teenager in the early 2000s, and it was a mistake to see the Bud Dwyer video. I don't want to see the Charlie Kirk video, especially because Charlie Kirk was someone that I was aware of, a content creator. I didn't follow him that much, but certainly someone I knew that was out there, as opposed to Bud Dwyer, who was just some random guy who shot himself like he was a politician. But that enough was shocking. Spare me the macabre nature of this. It's important to note from the outset that it was a leftist that killed Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson was influenced by Antifa, it appears. He had Antifa-themed messages on bullet casings. He was involved on Discord with people with left-wing views and in opposition ideologically to Charlie Kirk and what he represented. So don't fall for the lie that a Republican supporter killed him. Charlie Kirk was a moderate on the right. He was not by any stretch radical. I don't want to say far right because that's used as a derogatory word, but you couldn't put him into the dissident right if that's a category. He championed freedom and liberty, but he was on the right-wing side when it came to many of the social issues. As a Christian, I believe he was a Protestant. He would have opposed, abortion, and many of the standard right-wing positions would have been adopted by him. He was a Zionist. Apparently, he was maybe starting to wake up to a different worldview. Some people say, he was kind of becoming more onto the side of the dissident right, or the younger generations, not the boomer generation. And all of those of us millennials, Gen X, who have adopted the boomer worldview. I'm not just blaming boomers, but they're such a big generation. But we don't know. The fact is, when he died, he remained a moderate on the political right. So what can we take from that? We can take that if they're willing to kill a moderate like Charlie Kirk, then they'll kill anyone they want to. And the second thing we can take from this is that perhaps many on the left don't understand that Charlie Kirk was indeed a moderate, and that by painting and projecting onto him the image of a fascist leader, the void created by his death may be filled, probably not within Turning Point USA, but perhaps within another organization that arises, by a man that is actually radically to the right of Charlie Kirk. That is a possibility that maybe they have not contemplated on the other side. This is an act perpetrated by the left, but I also remind us that the enemy is spiritual. It is the satanic enemy. We must not get caught up always within the dichotomy of political parties. But as it stands, the Democrats are far more evil and have amongst their base truly evil people to a degree the Republicans do not. That doesn't mean we have to trust ultimately either party. But I'm just pointing out that yes, in this case the enemy is the left, but in a deeper significance the enemy goes much beyond the left and includes the globalists, who themselves are left or right, depending on how you use the terms. If you use the terms loosely, then left and right are both encompassed within the globalists. But in a more spiritual, traditional sense, right-wing is not globalist, and therefore it is the true Christian path to take, and we must take that path now. It should be more apparent to us that we have to return to orthodoxy, to Christianity, to a right-wing approach to protecting our societies. So it is said that this is a shocking event that will wake many people up to the fact that we have real enemies that are bent on our destruction. I suppose that could be true. Many more people will wake up to this reality. But I did not find Charlie Kirk's assassination to be a strange or surprising event. Considering everything the left has done since 2016, killing, maiming, and imprisoning people on our side, the right is less unified than the left, but loosely speaking, people on our side being absolutely persecuted for years now, culminating in the near assassination of Donald Trump in July of 2024, I do not find it strange that Kirk was murdered in a gathering of hundreds of people, presumably open to the public, with less security than Donald Trump would have had in 2024. But of course, people point out that the Secret Service wasn't doing their job at all for him there, so maybe that doesn't count for something. But Kirk would have had less protection, we can still say, than Trump would have had, and therefore he was able to be taken out. So I found it to be a disturbing event, but not a terribly shocking event after everything that's already happened. If it did wake you up, well, glad that you're here now. Better late than never. Glad you can get on the boat. Let's save our civilization, please. Now here's the main takeaway that hopefully many of us are realizing. You cannot debate the enemy. That doesn't mean you stop having live events and live debates and therefore let the enemy win. As Andrew Wilson points out correctly, this would be surrendering to the terrorists, because this is terrorism we're dealing with. But in a broader sense, we can realize that debate has its limits. They shot and killed the principal debater in America, at least in terms of popularity. Debate over, because you don't debate goblins and imps. Debate is something conducted within a civilized group of people. Our enemies in this case are uncivilized. So while we cannot surrender to these leftists who will put the fear into us for having any public events, we should perhaps realize that these events are only good for people on our own side, people who are willing to listen and not try to murder us. Maybe there needs to be more vetting in some sense and not actually fully opening it up to the public. Would that be a surrender? I don't know. It may be an adaptation, you could say. So we have to walk a fine line between not surrendering, but realizing that there's not going to be any free speech marketplace of ideas that comes to save the day. That was always an illusion anyways, the marketplace of ideas. It never really existed. It was always about real power, which controls messaging, top down. Point being, the end result, the end goal of having rallies, events, and public debates is not to wake up intellectually the populace, to wake up non-intellectual peasants. No, it is to bring about a situation where the government exercises power, where through the institutions, our side shuts down the goblins and the demons. These events are to bring about a situation where the population accedes to direct institutional power and takeover of institutions by the right, consciously, positively, to go after evil people like Tyler Robinson. That isn't winning in the marketplace of ideas. It's exercising real power through the institutions and through organizing. The left is organized. We have to organize. That is to say, no more stupidity from the James Lindsays, from the Konstantin Kissins. We're done with it, or are we done with it? Unfortunately, the fight will go on to get us to the point where we're actually ready to go after our enemies. We're not there yet, because the moderate right still worships freedom and liberty, and a reaction against our enemies is necessarily going to trounce freedom and liberty. It's going to put freedom and liberty down in some sense, and that reaction will provoke a struggle within the right. As Made by Jim Bob points out correctly, the struggle that will occur will not be our people against the dysgenic ghouls on the left, the cackling witches celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. They're stupid, incapable weaklings. They're used as pawns by the globalists, by dark spiritual forces. The real fight will be amongst those whom have hope to be brought over to our side. And those are amongst the people who have libertarian or liberal sympathies. If Trump employs RICO to go after all of Antifa, meaning you could prosecute anyone connected with an organization, so someone commits a crime, it's not just the individual person who commits the crime, you go after everyone and connected, and that involves an extraordinary extension of legal powers to prosecute these people. And that's where the sheepish people on the moderate right are going to get uncomfortable. They're going to talk about rights and following the Constitution properly, forgetting that the Constitution only works for a moral, religious people, and we're not in that situation anymore. But nonetheless, this may be the starting point for a real discussion on the right. But I am as yet unswayed that we're quite there yet. Maybe we'll get more of a discussion, but are we actually there in terms of using institutional powers against these evil people? I don't think we're there, firstly because we don't control the institutions. Trump may be in power, but, well, let's not get into him. Now is not the place for that. But we don't control the institutions. And secondly, the boomers who maintain these liberal values, and of course so do Gen X and millennials to an extent, but the boomers have been such a large and influential generation maintaining those liberal values, and they're living so long compared to previous generations that they still have many years ahead of them. I hope we can start to move past and adapt and move forward to the present threat. Hasta luego, amigos.